Somewhere in the humid lowlands of Paraguay, hidden beneath the canopy of a forest most maps forgot, there is a leaf. It is small, unremarkable. The kind of plant you would walk past without a second glance. Its stems are thin. Its flowers are white and delicate. Nothing about its appearance suggests anything extraordinary. But if you were to pluck that leaf and place it on your tongue, something would happen that defies everything you have been taught about sweetness. A sensation would flood your mouth, not subtle, not faint, intense, sharp, almost overwhelming. A sweetness so concentrated, so immediate, that your brain would struggle to process it. And here is the part that breaks the rules of nutrition as you know them. That leaf contains no sugar, no calories, no carbohydrates that your body can convert into energy or store as fat. It does not spike your blood glucose. It does not trigger an insulin response. It does not rot your teeth or feed the bacteria in your mouth. Requires no fields of sugarcane stretching across continents. No factories full of machinery to refine and process it. It simply grows. In backyards. In clay pots sitting on windowsills. In the wild, untended edges of forgotten farmland where nobody bothers to look. This leaf is 300 times sweeter than the white crystals sitting in your kitchen cabinet right now. 300 times. Not 3 times, not 30 times, 300. And for over 1,500 years, the indigenous Guarani people of South America have known exactly what they possessed. They called it ka'ahe'e. In their language, those words mean the sweet herb. They did not use it the way we use sugar today. They were not baking cakes or making candy. They stirred it into bitter medicines to make them bearable for children and the elderly. They dropped torn leaves into their mate tea, the traditional drink that fueled their days. They chewed it after meals as a simple pleasure. It was ordinary to them. Unremarkable. Just another gift from the forest. Just another plant among thousands that the land provided. And for centuries, while empires rose and fell, while wars reshaped continents, while the Industrial Revolution transformed human civilization, the rest of the world had no idea this leaf existed. Then, in 1899, everything began to change. A Swiss botanist named Moisés Bertoni arrived in Paraguay. He had come to study the region's extraordinary biodiversity, to catalogue plants, to document species, to do the quiet, patient work of science in a land far removed from the grand laboratories of Europe. One afternoon, while walking through a village, a local farmer approached him. The man held out a single leaf, small, green, unremarkable. He told Bertoni to taste it. Bertoni placed the leaf on his tongue. And in that moment, everything he understood about sweetness, about plants, about the limits of the natural world shifted beneath his feet. He wrote in his journals that the sensation was unlike anything he had encountered in decades of botanical research. The sweetness was extraordinary, unprecedented. He estimated this humble plant was 200, perhaps 300 times sweeter than refined cane sugar. He gave it a scientific name, Stevia rebaudiana, the first word from the genus, the second honoring a Paraguayan chemist named Ovidio Rebaudi, who helped him analyze the plant's chemical properties. Bertoni was not a man prone to exaggeration. He was a scientist. He documented his findings carefully. He published papers in respected journals. He sent reports to colleagues across the world. And he waited for the scientific community to respond, for investors to arrive, for the world to recognize what Paraguay had been hiding in plain sight for 15 centuries. The world did respond, with complete and total silence. For the next 70 years, stevia remained a botanical curiosity, a footnote in dusty journals stored on forgotten shelves, a line item in scientific papers that almost nobody read. Nobody invested in it, nobody tried to commercialize it. Nobody seemed to care about a plant that could revolutionize how humanity consumed sweetness. And if you understand how the world works, you already know why. Sugar was king. Sugar had plantations that stretched across the Caribbean, across Brazil, across vast territories colonized specifically to grow it. Sugar had lobbyists in every major government. Sugar had entire economies, entire nations, built around its cultivation and trade. Fortunes had been made, empires had been sustained. And stevia was a weed from Paraguay. It could not be patented because it was a plant. It could not be controlled because anyone with seeds and soil could grow it. It could not generate the kinds of profits that industrial agriculture demanded. So the sweetest leaf on earth stayed exactly where it was, growing quietly in the hills of South America, ignored by the very world that would later spend billions of dollars trying to synthesize in laboratories what this plant offered for free. But there was one nation paying attention, one country willing to look where others would not. Japan. In the early 1970s, the Japanese government faced a problem that no amount of denial could solve. Artificial sweeteners were under intense scrutiny. Cyclamate had already been banned after studies raised health concerns. Saccharin was controversial, surrounded by questions about potential cancer risks. The Japanese people wanted sweet foods and beverages. The Japanese government wanted safety, and the existing options were failing to deliver both. So researchers in Japan did something remarkable. They looked beyond the established players, beyond the chemical corporations, beyond the patented formulas and proprietary compounds. They looked at a plant. In 1971, a Japanese company imported stevia from Paraguay. They studied its chemistry with meticulous care. They developed extraction methods that could isolate the sweet compounds while removing the bitter aftertaste of the raw leaf. They conducted safety trials. They gathered data. By 1975, stevia-based sweeteners were appearing on Japanese store shelves, in soft drinks, in candies, in chewing gum, in pickled vegetables and soy sauce, and dozens of other everyday products consumed by millions of Japanese citizens. And something extraordinary happened. Nothing bad. No wave of illness. No scandals. No regulatory disasters. No hospitals flooded with victims of this supposedly untested plant. Just a leaf doing exactly what it had done for 1,500 years in Paraguay, making things sweet without making people sick. Within a single decade, stevia captured over 40% of Japan's entire sweetener market. Pause on that number for a moment. Let it fully register. 40%. In one of the most developed nations on Earth, a country with some of the strictest food safety regulations anywhere, a society that demands quality and punishes corporate negligence, a plant with no corporate backing, no advertising budget, no patent protection, no celebrity endorsements, no marketing campaigns, had quietly taken nearly half the market from industrial giants that had dominated for generations. Meanwhile, across the Pacific Ocean, in the United States of America, something very different was happening. In 1919, the United States Food and Drug Administration issued an import alert on stevia. They classified it as an unlawful food additive. They prohibited its use in any food product sold to American consumers. The reasoning they provided was simple: inadequate evidence of safety. Not evidence of harm, not documented cases of illness, not hospital reports or autopsies or toxicology studies showing that stevia had hurt anyone, just inadequate evidence of safety. Now consider the context surrounding that decision. At the exact moment the FDA declared stevia unsafe, Aspartame was fully approved and present in thousands of American products. Diet sodas in every convenience store, sugar-free desserts in every supermarket freezer, tabletop sweeteners in paper packets at every restaurant in the country, saccharin, which had triggered bladder cancer in laboratory rats at high doses, which had carried a mandatory warning label for years, remained perfectly legal for human consumption. And stevia, a leaf that indigenous people had consumed without incident for 1,500 years, a plant that Japan had used commercially for 2 full decades without a single regulatory crisis, was classified as a threat to American public health. I am not going to tell you this was a conspiracy. I am not going to claim that corporate executives gathered in secret rooms to plot against a plant from Paraguay, but I am going to ask you to notice something that most people overlook. Stevia is a plant. It grows in soil. Anyone with a packet of seeds and a sunny window can cultivate it in their own home. It cannot be patented because it is a product of nature. It cannot be owned because it belongs to no one. It cannot be controlled by any single corporation. Artificial sweeteners are fundamentally different. They require laboratories, chemical synthesis, manufacturing facilities that cost millions of dollars to build, licensing agreements, distribution networks, supply chains controlled by a handful of companies with the resources to navigate complex regulatory systems. When a product can be patented, it can be owned. When it can be owned, it can generate predictable profits. When it can generate profits, it attracts investment. When it attracts investment, it attracts lobbying power. When it attracts lobbying power, it shapes the regulatory environment. When you understand incentives, you begin to understand decisions that otherwise make no sense. A product that anyone can grow in their backyard will always face more scrutiny than a product that only billion-dollar corporations can manufacture. Not necessarily because of genuine safety concerns, because of economics, because of who benefits from approval and who benefits from delay. The United States was not alone in treating stevia with suspicion. The European Union restricted it for decades. Health Canada prohibited its use as a food ingredient until 2012. Australia and New Zealand kept it in regulatory limbo. Singapore hesitated. Hong Kong waited. In some countries, stevia was banned outright. In others, it existed in a strange legal gray zone. You could purchase it as a dietary supplement in a health food store. You could not find it listed as an ingredient in any mainstream food product. For nearly 30 years, across multiple continents, while artificial chemicals with names most people could not pronounce filled grocery store shelves, the sweetest leaf on the planet sat in regulatory darkness. And then, in 2008, the landscape shifted. The FDA issued what regulators call a no-objection letter for Rebaudioside A, a purified compound extracted from the stevia leaf. After decades of prohibition, stevia was suddenly permitted in American food products. But pay close attention to how this approval actually unfolded. The green light did not go to small farmers in Paraguay who had cultivated this plant for generations. It did not go to herbalists who had advocated for natural alternatives. It did not go to the Guarani people whose ancestors discovered stevia long before modern science existed. It went to Cargill, one of the largest agricultural corporations on the planet. It went to PepsiCo. It went to Coca-Cola. These corporations had spent years developing proprietary extraction and purification methods, processes that could be patented, technologies that could be licensed, brand names that could be trademarked and marketed, Truvia, Purevia, names that could be owned even if the underlying plant could not. The leaf itself remained unpatentable. But the supply chain, the refining technology, the packaging and marketing and distribution, those could be controlled. Those could generate shareholder value. Those could justify the corporate investment. And so stevia finally entered the American mainstream, not as a folk remedy passed down through generations, not as a traditional food honored for its ancient origins, as a corporate product, processed and packaged and sold by the same industrial food system that had ignored it for an entire century. Today you can find stevia in virtually any grocery store. It sits in green packets next to the sugar and the artificial sweeteners. It appears in ingredient lists on protein bars and flavored waters and zero-calorie sodas and countless other products marketed to health-conscious consumers. Most people assume it was always available. They have no idea about the import alerts, the decades of restriction, the countries that banned a simple plant while simultaneously approving synthetic chemicals created in laboratories. They see a product on a shelf and assume the system worked exactly as it should have. But this story is not really about stevia, not entirely. It is about how societies decide what is safe and what is dangerous. It is about who holds the power to make those decisions and what interests shape the outcomes. It is about the invisible line between science and economics, and how often those two forces become so tangled together that nobody can tell them apart. A plant that anyone can grow will always be treated differently than a compound that requires factories to produce. Not because the plant is more dangerous, because it is less profitable. That is not conspiracy. That is incentive structure. And once you learn to see it, you will notice it everywhere. So what do you do with this knowledge? First, understand that stevia is legal now. In most countries around the world, the old restrictions have been lifted. You can purchase it freely. The concerns expressed in 1991 are no longer official policy. Second, recognize that whole-leaf stevia and commercially refined stevia extracts are not identical products. The green powder made from dried and crushed leaves has a different flavor profile than the white crystalline substances sold in paper packets. Both appear to be safe based on current evidence, but they offer different experiences. Third, if you are exploring ways to reduce your sugar intake, if you are working to manage blood glucose levels, if you simply want to understand the full range of options available to you, stevia represents one tool among many. It is not magic, it is not medicine. It is not a miracle cure for anything. It is a leaf with an unusual chemical property that humans have consumed safely for a very long time. And finally, remember this: the absence of something from store shelves does not automatically mean it is harmful. Sometimes it means the opposite. Sometimes it means the product is too simple, too natural, too difficult to monetize within existing industrial systems. The Guarani people of Paraguay did not need laboratories to validate what their tongues already knew. They did not need regulatory approval to sweeten their tea. They did not need corporate marketing to trust a leaf their grandparents had trusted. For 1,500 years, they relied on a plant, and that plant never betrayed them. 300 times sweeter than sugar. 0 calories, no patents possible, no factories required. Grown by indigenous communities for centuries, embraced by Japanese consumers for decades, banned by Western regulators while synthetic alternatives flourished. Finally approved only when major corporations found a way to profit from it. This is the story of stevia, the sweet herb, the leaf that waited in the shadows until the economics finally made sense. And now you know what they never printed on the label. If this changed how you think about food, about regulation, about the invisible forces that shape what appears on your grocery store shelves, consider subscribing. There are more stories like this one, more things hiding in plain sight, more questions that nobody seems to be asking. Welcome to the vault.